Well, done under medical auspices, it's a relatively innocuous procedure. Under illegal criminal circumstances, it presents considerable hazards to health and life both. Even under medical circumstances, however, there can be occasional problems.
Operation, of course. Let's go back to the reporter in Abilene and talk about that situation just a little bit, because we haven't been able to talk to you in person about it.
Well, I tried to clear that situation up. I was in Abilene emceeing a beauty pageant there about 3 weeks ago, and a reporter asked me what I thought of Coach Landry calling the plays, and I said, well, I was like many other quarterbacks and didn't particularly enjoy the coach calling the plays. And I've always stated that. I stated it during Super Bowl week and during the whole season. Under the circumstances last year in our season, the way it went, he felt that calling the plays was the right thing to do, and it worked out pretty well. I don't know what's going to happen next year. I'm sure he doesn't anticipate calling the plays next year, but I really have no choice if he chooses to call them. I'll just have to go with what he says. He's the boss, and I respect the man very greatly and his football knowledge, and I hope that I can learn enough, and hopefully I can call my own plays next year.
Well, he just come out across the road there and pointed a gun at me and says, get in that pickup and start it up or I'll shoot you.
And?
And I got in and started up.
Where did he take you?
Oh, about 2 miles north of Princeton.
Did he ever threaten you?
Well, told me if I didn't do what he said he would, he'd kill me.
Did you fear for your life at that time?
Well, no, not till I got out.
Do you expect any rejection from the TSTA?
I feel that they will cooperate because we're all interested in the same things. It's just a case of deciding what route we're going to take to solve our problem.
Mr. Sanford, why are you meeting over here at this time? Why are you not a part of the TSTA, and why are you not involved in that convention now?
Well, we felt that the problem was of such magnitude that we needed to get together to consider the thing, to discuss it, and then perhaps go to them.
As briefly as you can put it, what is the problem?
Well, the problems are many-fold. One is, as we see it, the phasing out of black teachers, the disruption that interferes with the educational process.
Are black teachers, in fact, being phased out, or are they being reassigned to other schools?
They're being phased out.
It will give them more autonomy and more authority to use federal funds with less red tape. They'll have authority to transfer up to 30% of the funds from one block grant category to another, and they'll have much more flexibility in adapting the money to their own local needs without quite so much dictation from Washington.
Well, under this revenue-sharing plan, Mr. Bell, what control will the Dallas and Fort Worth area school districts lose or gain for that matter?
Well, I think you'll gain a great deal more control. The Federal Office of Education will allocate this money on a formula basis to the State Education Agency, and the State Education Agency will make the allocations out to the school districts, and so the Dallas-Fort Worth school districts, for example, will be dealing with the Texas Education Agency.
The idea of revenue sharing has not been a popular one at all. What reception do you think this bill is going to get?
Well, I think some kind of a revenue sharing act will pass. Now, it may not have that label, it may have another title, but I think that we have so many federal programs, or so much red tape and bureaucratic problem, that I think some kind of an act will pass.
Well, Jerry, I think what Dr. Knight did was he went in and found that the nerve and some of the tendons were being pinched together by some scar tissue that was growing around the joint, and having landed on it and having bruised it and maybe torn some muscle in there, some scar tissue did form, and when he opened it up, he found that everything was being pinched together in there.
So he discovered something after he'd gone in there?
Well, I think that more or less he knew what he was looking for, but it wasn't as serious as operation that as he anticipated. I think it took him maybe an hour and a half, whereas he thought maybe it'd take him maybe 2 or 3 hours at first. But I'm real well pleased with what the results. He's very excited about it, and maybe I'll have a good arm again.
When will you be able to start throwing?
I plan to start throwing in about 3 weeks. He said that if everything works right, that I can start throwing the football in about 3 or 4 weeks.
Do you plan to use any weightlifting or anything that you would normally not do in order to get your arm back in shape?
No, I really don't know what he's going to have me do as far as recuperating. I know that we usually go on a weight program. I'm sure that he's going to have me do some of that, but it'll probably start out with some easy throwing and then go into the weight program.
We're all glad that this...
Because I have nothing personal against Dr. Carter. I think that his operation is one that has caused doubt in the past, and I don't condemn or condone what he is doing. This is not a personal vendetta. He is helping heroin addicts, and this is what we are trying to do in this bill. Let me again reemphasize that this is not my bill. I'm simply a co-author, and as such, Dr. Carter is not affected by this bill.
Heroin addicts are real addicts. They are hooked. They live miserable lives, going from trip to trip, and each trip becomes a desperately sought for escape from the misery and agony of their lives. So I think that these kinds of people would be willing to try, because here is a program that enables them to have a trip, quote, quote, but under control and with a gradual withdrawal aiming towards complete rehabilitation.
On paper, it sounds like it would be a reasonable law. However, Texas is in the enviable position of having seen other states try this law, principally California, Colorado, and New York's, which is even less restrictive. It still seems to be, unfortunately, that the law is discriminatory in that all the red tape involved seems to drive the cost high. So we still have a situation where abortion is available to a woman with financial resources, and it is not available to her poorer sister.
Somewhere in the Fort Worth area, a person has a live 90-millimeter tank shell that's probably similar to one of these two here. 2 of the shells were sold last weekend, at a flea market on Mansfield Highway. Since then, one of the shells has been found and disarmed at Carswell Air Force Base. A Forest Hills man had planned to use the shell to drill a hole in it for a lampshade or a lamp base. To explain the hazards of a live shell, I contacted Captain Roy Champ, Captain of the 2nd Battalion, 112th Armor here in Fort Worth. What would happen if one of these shells were dropped? Would it explode?
Well, there is a primer, which of course is on the inside and runs up through the center of the shell. If you should drill a hole through this cartridge case, more than likely you would have set off this primer. And of course, if you did, this would explode the whole round.
Well, if anyone at all has any shells of this nature, smaller or larger, what advice could you give them?
My advice would be to immediately report it to the police, because although you might handle it several days and nothing happened, the very next time you mess with it, it could explode.
Did he give you any resistance?
Well, he told me he was going to kill me.
What'd you tell him? You had the drop on him.
But no, I didn't have a drop on him.
Did he have the drop on you?
He had it on me, but I had a shotgun on him.
Mexican sweat.
Yeah, I guess that's what you'd call it.
He put his down first.
No, he shot the gas to it, told me he was going to kill the girl, the kids, and the woman that's with him. And he gave the car the gas and went on up the road, and I run on up behind him again. And the girl jumped out on the north side of the car, and he jumped out. When he did, I was out of the car, and I had my shotgun, and he throwed the gun.
point by what
the Detroit program using Sesame Street. That has proven successful to see what we could do to have a similar kind of program here for the free.
Since a Chamber of Commerce gathering last evening in Mineral Wells, there is some hope that Fort Walters will remain open. A gathering of 600 persons heard Senator John Towers say there is no definite plan now to close the helicopter training base, that the announced phasing out of the complex will be re-examined, but that remains to be seen. Congressman Jim Wright told me today that Presidential Advisor Henry Kissinger said he feels that the Pentagon should reconsider the closing of Fort Walters and that he will request such a reconsideration.
Henry Kissinger, the principal advisor to the president, told me that he had sent a rather lengthy memorandum that I had sent to him over to Secretary Laird and asked Secretary Laird to reconsider this decision. That doesn't mean that it's going to be changed, But I guess the best we can say is that the door, which was closed, is now slightly ajar, and we've got our foot in the door before they locked it.
200 civilian workers at Southern Airways of Texas, located on the base, have been laid off in the past 2 days, which would indicate that Southern Airways believes that Fort Walters will close. There was mixed reaction today about the hope of keeping the base open from people on the streets in Mineral Wells.
Don't really think they will. Don't really think they will. I think there'll be a way out. I think they'll reconsider it.
Personally, it's hard to say because there is an abundance of aviators in the Army, but at the rate things are going in Vietnam, I think we'll need them, and I think it should stay open.
Your husband did receive notice?
Yes, he got laid off Friday.
And he worked for whom?
Southern Airways.
Where will you go now?
I don't know. We haven't really discussed it. We thought about going to Houston.
The consideration of the economic relation between Fort Walters and Mineral Wells is one of the arguments to keep the base open. Maybe, if or when Fort Walters is closed, the city of Mineral Wells could lose up to 63% of local business. Jim Green, Channel 8 News on the Move, Fort Walters.
To try to obtain funds to direct ourselves to reaching children at an early age. As to whether we would utilize district funds to implement an expanded program with childhood education, I think we're going to have to look at the overall priorities. I personally feel this to be a high priority item, and if we are not able to get the kind of outside fund that we would need for this purpose, I would like us to look at this very closely and see if there's any possible way that we can direct ourselves to this in an effective manner.
Well, this radar was designed for WFAA is a powerful long-range radar, a range of 250 miles and a peak output power of 350 kW.
Bill, what does this mean well, let's say it first in the form of range. How far do you feel that this particular radar will reach from WFAA?
Well, this radar will reach 250 miles easily. It will detect 1 millimeter per hour of rainfall at 150 nautical miles. But 1 millimeter per hour would hardly be enough to turn the windshield wipers on in a car. It would be a very light rainfall, what you would probably call a trace of rain.
Isn't this a beautifully cool, refreshing sight? Gee, wasn't this a beautiful day today? You know, it's still winter on the calendar. The man says it's going to be spring here in a few days, but spring came to Dallas today. You know, when you see sights like this fountain at Ferris Plaza, looking at the Union Terminal in the background, it really makes you glad that you were alive on a day like this. It makes newsmen like ourselves feel that, well, this day had its violence, this day had its hard news stories, but that at this time in our newscast we can put those things aside for a moment, revel in the beauty of nature and the nature that man has helped make, and just kind of reflect back, say, well, we're glad the violence is over, and we're also glad that we have this kind of beauty to enjoy. It's a gorgeous day, and I, for one, am thankful for it. This is Jim Mitchell, Channel 8 News.